intro to marriage, and we'll just make do with the. Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted best of the web 2 years running. Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people around the world. So much going on. I just want to say, first of all, a huge thank you to Maura for showing up. Diane is supposed to be here, found it, but screen is black. Okay, yes, like he said, let me do some housekeeping, and which is, I'm going to resend a link. So bear with me just for a moment, okay? Hold on. Don't go away, everybody. I'll be right back. I love it. So many interesting things. Maura, can you hear me, by the way?
I can hear you just fine, Barry.
And can you see me?
Perfectly.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, let me do this. I'm going to copy this, send it to Diane again, and let's see what we have here. I'll be right back. And you can still hear me and see me, and the thousands and thousands of people around the world were tuning in and saying, what's going on? I say, well, it's just called life and technology and the link. Let me see here. Bear with me. Where does it go? There it goes, right there. And okay. And now I'm coming back. Hi, everybody. From an old broad. No, new link. Okay. Just sent a new link. By the way, that's one of the wonderful things about technology is that when it works, it's great. And when it doesn't work, it's still great. Now, let's go back and say, hello, good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. Remember, you're good-looking because you're always looking for and finding the good. You have found good and abundance because you've consciously and conscientiously tuned into the greatest show about the most important, fundamental, bedrock institution in the world, and that is, of course, marriage. Marriage with Joy, and we have joy in abundance with wonderful Dr. Diane Medved. She's now occupying the lower part of our screen. Usually she's in the upper part of the screen, but she lives in the upper part of the country. She lives in the great Northwest, where, of course, she's experiencing that transition from summer into fall, and it's already probably overcast, maybe even a little drizzle once in a while, but the leaves are beautiful, and that's compensation enough. No, it's not. We prefer Hawaii.
It's been pouring. It's been pouring. Absolutely.
Oh, pouring, not just drizzle.
Right now it's raining. I wouldn't say it's pouring right now. It's raining. We have, it's like the Eskimos and words for snow. We have that many words for rain. We have.
Right. It's rain, and then there's more rain. And then, of course, there's downpour rain and light rain and drizzle rain and et cetera rain.
No, when it's raining, they say some sun.
Oh, some sun. That's called, how should we call it? That's called Seattle inside the belt humor. And of course, wonderful Maura is anchoring in the lower part of the 48. She is on the west coast of Florida. And we have wonderful Lori, who will not be joining us probably because I spoke to Lori earlier, and Lori is in the left coast of the United States, way in the bottom of Manhattan Beach. She was running down the stairs 2 days ago, and she made a slight turn quickly and fell and broke her arm. So she had a cast put on. She's going to the doctor now to get a new cast put on and reset and all kinds of stuff like that. But it's the genius of it is it's called life. Life is the most unpredictable thing in the world. I mean, there's nothing more unpredictable than life other than a sunshiny day in the middle of November in Seattle. That's really unprecedented. But, stuff like that could happen. Unlikely, but it could happen. So Lori is not joining us at the moment, and unlikely that she'll be joining us. But we're going to carry on, because that's what we do. We carry on and we make the best we can do. And you have thankfully tuned in to the greatest show on the internet about the most important. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Talk about a trooper. About a trooper. Oh.
I couldn't find the login. Sorry.
She didn't want me to be accused of fibbing or exaggerating, so she held up her arm to say, "Up yours, Barry." I mean, see my cast? That's what she was saying. A cast of thousands. Okay, and she can only stay for a little bit. So what I'll do is I'm going to ask you, Lori, to begin today, and we're going to talk about 3 things all at once. So you can address them if you want or not. We have some articles that I've been sending around, which basically how should we say, the thrust of these articles are marriage is under attack. Now, hello, we've known that for a while, and the reason this show began a couple of years ago is exactly because of that issue. We call this, of course, marriage with joy, because it's joy that is going to dispel the darkness. It's joy that's going to push away that smoke of confusion. It's joy that is going to bring you sunshine in the midst of a rainy day, no matter where it is in the world, because that's really what marriage is based upon. However, not a but, however, and there are forces in the world today, mostly in the what we call the Western world, that really want to undermine this remarkable institution called marriage, which has been a foundational aspect of civilizational advancement for it's certainly the past 250 years, maybe even more. And to that, wonderful Lori, I'm going to ask you to speak about what you see, because you live in an interesting community. You live in Southern California. You deal with women who are in the midst of finding their world turned upside down and maybe not so happy with their marriage, going through potential divorce or just speaking about divorce. But you're also part of a Catholic community where divorce, I believe, is still more rare than in the general community. And I'd like you to speak to this issue that do you see that marriage is under attack by, let's say, the forces of civilization, well, not even civilization, than what's happening in America, specifically in Southern California? Do you see that marriage is under attack, or is it my imagination?
Oh, wow. I never go first on this. Okay. Usually I'm more of a funny answer at the end.
Right.
But I do have to go, and I appreciate you giving me some time now. Yeah, I do. I think it's, when I was going through a hard time, the amount of people, even family members on other people's side, I think if everyone just says give up, right? So there's no one, if you don't have the right foundation to know what it looks like to stay married and how to fight through it, you're not going to be able to know what to say to other people when they're going through a hard time. For example, when I went to my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law and said, this is what's happening. My husband wants to leave our marriage. He's not happy. He wants to go out. And their response was, yeah, well, he's not happy. And it's like, wait, what? And we had part of this Catholic community that I'm in. We had hundreds of friends that were like besties of ours. And people were like, what? He's doing what? What a jerk. And then they would turn. I'm like, can you talk to him? And they're like, about what? He made his choice. Turn. It's like, so he would reach out. My husband would reach out to them as well. Like, what do I do? I don't know. I'm really struggling. And people turned their back on him. And there's not an arsenal of people out there who say, you know what? Here's what you do. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how you solve this. And here's how, if other people are around, here's how you solve this. Because if marriage goes away, we lose our foundation. I cannot tell you how many kids in my neighborhood don't have anyone to go talk to. And having 2 parents in this household, I am like giving out free counseling days all day long. And people are like, well, what do I do? Or kids. And there's no foundation. And if you don't have the proper foundation to launch yourself from, you're going to be struggling. Now, can a one person launch a child? Absolutely. Husband dies, the woman regroups. You could do it. But the wife who gets left behind by a person who died, the kids are more resilient to that because dad's off the planet. If dad was here, nailing the neighbor or the lady down the street, that's confusing. Now I got to know all those kids and whoever else she's attached to. It's just chaos. And that's what's happening in our world. And so all these like people that are woke and not, being generational and doing this and that, there's no foundation. What is the foundation? Now we're going to go away from God into, well, the foundation is, this tissue box. Believe in this false God of this tissue box. It's going to save your life. You're going to be okay. So we're going to start finding false gods and random people getting together because nobody has a community of foundation. And we're missing community. We're missing foundation. I mean, if you have two parents that go away, you've got a community that holds you together. Right? Hillary Clinton used to talk about, it takes a village. And it does. You got to be a village for everybody. So I have offered myself to any kid that comes around me. You need me, let me know. You need this, you need a ride, you need whatever you need. I'm here to help you get to the doctor, whatever. And I think if more people, instead of going, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my life? If they turn that around and said, how can I be of service? I know what's missing in my community. I'm going to be of service, not necessarily getting a job to do it, but just being available on your own and making those people near you in your circle. If everyone does that in their circle, we could cover a lot of bases. I don't think people do that though. Oh, it's none of my business. I don't want to get involved. You know what? Freaking get involved. Step up.
Right. I want to ask you about something that you mentioned. It was, I was a little bit shocked and disappointed that when your circle of friends that you called besties found out, or you mentioned, or your husband mentioned, they weren't there to be supportive and say, okay, let's do things again. They sort of said, okay, well, that's your issue now. Let's
too bad. Let it go. Move on. Get divorced. And what was interesting is when this happened to me, it was as if I used to go to church and I would sit in the back and I would look around the church and I would say, oh my gosh, everyone's so happy. When this happened to me and people found out about it, everyone would come up to me and say, it happened to me. Oh my gosh, it happened to my cousin so-and-so. Oh my gosh, people would dump on me their problems. And then I would go to church and be like, no one's freaking happy. I know every story of every people in here and they're all a mess. So I thought it was really interesting that nobody's talking about all these terrible things that are happening to them and no one's getting support and they're just letting these things happen instead of like looking for support. It's the strangest thing. And then there's this organization, sorry, I'm talking too much. There's an organization at my church called After the Divorce or After the Separation or Beyond Separation. I went there to look for like hope. I wanted to commit suicide when I was done. I'm like, these people are they're the leaders of the group are the most depressing people on the planet. And I've gone back several times going, let me take over this group. I can make it positive. We can, help people like form like better community. And they're like, no, we're good. I'm like,
Okay, another question.
Beating my head against the wall.
Another question that you said that at this particular juncture, because you've been through stuff, apart, healed, and better for it, that you and your husband and your kids are one of the few families intact, two-parent households where other kids come to see things. Is that correct? You're saying you're one of the few these days?
Yeah, in fact, my 5 best friends in 2012 and 13, who were all around me when this was happening, and they were supportive to me. Every single one of them are divorced now.
So this is it's a raging epidemic.
100%.
Well, Diane has a book called The Case Against Divorce, and a lot of people, and not only that, I mean, talk about wonderful things, by the way. We found that out on one of the shows that Lori read the book because, we were doing this thing together. But I know you need to go and get your arm reset and such like that, but you use some really important words. Number one, chaos, which seems to be in the air. It's almost as if you had to plan on malign forces sowing chaos in the country, they couldn't do a better job than what's happening by itself. Now, I don't think things happen just by itself. They don't, you don't have spontaneous regeneration or generation. By the same token, there is this unfortunate false god, as you mentioned, about, well, gee, I'm sitting here in the back of the church. Everybody else is happy. Okay, maybe I can. And then you find out that, guess what? Real life. So I think it's the case. I'm about to say something. It's upwards of 85% and maybe over 90% of pastors, ministers, and rabbis are much more prone towards suicide, or certainly suicidal thoughts, than most other type of professions, including doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs, because they know a lot of people's stories. They, by definition, people come and give them the things that are bothering them, and they are weighed down because it's very hard oftentimes to lift off that weight of knowing that so-and-so and so-and-so seemingly moving along in the path of happiness and joy and love, they're not. Now, of course, it's not easy to counsel people because, as you said, you went to a counseling group and they said, no, we're cool, even though it's not working out the way you knew you could do better, because you would bring positive, purposeful, powerful, and pleasant to them. They were doing things by maybe a handbook and didn't know how to interact with humans. You see, really what we're talking about here on this marriage with joy is to understand that the human experience is rooted in the ability to grow. I think we've said this almost every show, and if we didn't, we should continue to say it. One of the reasons, if there's a reason to get married, has little to do with love. It's a wonderful thing. Let's be blunt. The heart goes pitter patter. The rest of your body goes pitter patter. Okay, that's good for a little bit of time. The real genius of life and of getting married and intimate with another being is to be able to grow and manifest and live to the fullest life possible, which oftentimes, at least in my experience, I'm married to the same person 45 years, but I say that and I just realized the words came out of my mouth. It's not. By definition, I'm not the same person I was 45 years ago. I hope not. If she tells me I'm not, so okay, it must be true. And then my wife is certainly not. And that's part of the beauty of this remarkable institution. Bye, we love you. Get better.
Feel better.
Called marriage. That you can grow, because you can grow in something we call trust. So what I'd like to do is throw to you, Diane, because you're always the first up. So just assume you're the first up right now. And let's talk about what seems to be happening from both the left, which is vocal about undermining marriage, and the right even, which is finding it difficult to understand what's happening with marriage. As I sent an article out and Maura went on, I just looked up this person. Her name is Pearl Davis. I'm only mentioning the name because she has 1.8 million followers on YouTube, and she poses as a right-wing conservative. And she says also that marriage is not the best gig for people, and mostly for men. She says the feminist era has caused more difficulties for the marriage process than anything else that you could imagine. Now, I will tell you, before I ask you the actual question to comment on, I'm older than both of you. And when I was very heavily involved with a woman who I thought maybe was going to be my wife, at the time we had been going out maybe 2.5, 3 years or so. So she she read a book by Germaine Gear, right? You remember her, Germaine Gear, called The Female Eunuch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, we called it the eunuch. But, and The Female Eunuch. And I must tell you, I found it fascinating. My girlfriend at the time certainly found it fascinating. And it caused a movement in our relationship because it was a screed. I'll call it that. It wasn't a creed. It was a screed to some extent. It was certainly brand new. You're talking about what, 1976? So that's certainly before most of the people listening to us. But that was a thrust into the world of the new feminine mystique, the new feminine liberation. And therefore, marriage was an anachronistic institution, which certainly nobody should pay much attention to. So I'm asking you now as a question, Diane, because this is your bailiwick. Do you see that marriage is under attack and, using a Jack and the Beanstalk analogy, is being whacked at the very base? Or am I imagining it?
Well, obviously, there's been big changes. You started off by saying that there was some nefarious conspiracy trying to undermine marriage. I don't believe that. What I believe is that we've become more self-centered and narcissistic, whereby marriage is a commitment to another person, and you're committed to give and ahava, love, the other person, which means putting that person and then your children above yourself. Unfortunately, the change has been toward making ourselves first and other people after that. So if I'm not feeling good today, then that's the first thing I attend to before I even check in with my partner, because I'm not feeling good today. And that's number one. There is a book, by Ringer, Looking Out for Number One. Robert Ringer wrote that book. It was in the probably 68, something like that. By the way, Germaine Greer's Feminine Mystique was also in the late 60s. Mm-hmm. And the point being that I don't think there's a coordinated conspiracy against marriage. I think what there is a change in values, a shift toward something that's very negative for our culture and negative for us as individuals, which is to say my feelings trump everything else. And that then led in the 1980s to the peak of divorce, at which time the false figure of 50% divorce rate was invented. And since then, in the article that you sent out to us today, Barry, by Matt Walsh, he was talking about a 75% divorce rate that's being bandied about. Not true, especially two people who have been to college. If you marry such a person yourself, the chances are more than 70% that you will remain married for the rest of your lives.
Wait a minute. I want you to repeat this, because this is stunningly positive, purposeful, powerful news.
Absolutely, especially well-educated people, but even lesser educated people. First of all, there's no 50% divorce rate. And if you are college educated, then the statistics show you'll be married until death. 70% at least. So look, we can't help what another person does. I know that Lori's profession of dealing with couples where one person strays often causes marriages with a partner who's left behind and feeling bereft. So you can't blame a marriage. You can blame individuals in it who put themselves first, who tend to put their own desires and needs and cravings above the commitment they made. I think the problem nowadays for a lot of people is commitment. And when you make a commitment, the old marriage vows, why did they have to toss them out in sickness and in health, for richer and for poorer? That was trying to encompass the fact that you are with this person for the duration. And whatever comes your way as a couple or even as an individual, you're there for each other. You're going to face it together. You're going to see the other person as your helpmate and also your support, so that together you can get through things you couldn't get through together. I couldn't get through otherwise.
Right.
And so I think that while there's no conspiracy to undermine marriage, I think it has eroded because of this emphasis and the fact that so many people have undergone it and have that attitude that Lori was talking about before of, I don't want to get involved. They don't want to be the one who is the sanctioner, who gives another person a stigma. There should be a stigma about failure in marriage because it means that you've failed on your commitment. Now, then again, to reiterate, there are a lot of people who are had to get divorced because the other person departed and left the marriage. And you can't blame those individuals at all. But I think that we need to go back a little bit in time and see that when marriages were together, children fared better. They were happier in life. They were healthier in life as the marital partners were. And they were able to then enter the world with a sense of security that now they can't, because they have two places to live and they don't know if mommy still loves daddy or daddy and mommy love me. And so they lose their sense of security. And children like that going out into the world give us a less secure world collectively. So we need to realize that marriage is good for ourselves. It's good for our children. It's good for our communities, and it's good for our whole society and culture. And if we can look at that and see that there are ripples and ramifications about not keeping commitments and not being there for each other, then maybe we can be more motivated to try and do whatever we can to keep marriages together, and also to support all the marriages that are around us. When somebody gets married, we shouldn't just say, here's your blender. We should say, and I'm here for you.
Wait a minute, that was so sexist, even though I do like blenders.
Could have been the vacuum cleaner.
Sexist. Wait a minute, I thought that was not at all sexist. Everybody drinks smoothies. Come on. Whoa. But the key being that it's not a celebration for a party. It's a beginning of a lifetime together. And you as a friend shouldn't just give the material gifts, but you should give the spiritual gifts of being there as a role model and as a support for any couple that you know in your environment who may need it. And in a way, it's like we're so wanting not to look and not wanting to be involved, but it could be a favor to come to someone who you see who seems to be in distress and say, I'm here for you. If you want to talk, if you want to be with us, if you want to, we're here for you because we're your friends, and that is a lifetime commitment as well.
This is, let's unpack a few things here. First of all, Lori mentioned this wonderful word, which you're also using, service. The ability for her to, let's say, been in church and look around and say, oh, everybody else is happy. And then when people found out, well, it was, they weren't there for her. And what she was understanding was that in her role now of helping other people, especially women who seem to want to go through a divorce, and she urges people not to whenever she can, unless it has to be. But it's really about service. Service is I think the other side of the coin of commitment. The two pieces to that wonderful coin, service and commitment. I will mention to you that today, usually I don't mention the exact date of our broadcast. Today is the 27th of September. So in today's Wall Street Journal, there's a fascinating article. I didn't have time to send it. I was thinking about doing it. It's called The Two-Parent Privilege. And there's, I think, numerous studies. And there's another one.
I have a whole chapter in my book, Don't Divorce, about that. So I have all the studies. Buy my book, Don't Divorce.
Right, don't divorce. The case against divorce.
I mean, you show all the reasons. And that's it.
If you really care about children, your children, other people's children even, be a model. Two-parent households are a model. If it's not for your kids, it's for other people's kids. She mentioned it in her neighborhood. Hello, they're the model. And she's been through stuff. She went through the worst part of that anybody can imagine. The husband leaves, he goes away, and she was angered and yet was able to work with it. So when he did want to come back, she was able to do that with a full heart. That's not an easy situation. I will mention one thing though, and it struck me greatly yesterday in preparation for what we're doing here, because as I said, we have, thank God, lots of people listen, thousands and thousands of people share and such like that. And I did hear an interesting insight from somebody that I respect. And I was listening to a podcast that was mentioning some other person. And this person had a woman on, very articulate and quite knowledgeable in the world of relationships and such. And she says one of the fascinating things that men tend not to think about, but women seem to, and maybe less so, I hope less so in today's age, is that when you get married, the D word comes in. Now, not the D word of divorce, the D word called drudgery. What does that mean? That the woman tends to think, and maybe even the man tends to think, wait a minute, I'm committing to make dinner for the rest of my life. I'm telling you what this very articulate, very successful woman was saying, that women come to her and think, oh my gosh, is that really the case? Now, obviously, maybe not so obviously. In today's environment, I would say a very large proportion of women are either working or are professional, but a lot of women have jobs outside the home, unless and certainly before they have children and such like that. And yet the idea that, wait a minute, am I committing to making dinner for the rest of my life? How does that work in a relationship where obviously, I say obviously, in today's environment, it needs to be talked about beforehand. In other words, is a man expecting that a woman is going to make dinner every night? Or is it something that you discuss and say, what do we do about something called, eating together? Do we order in every night? Do we both share cooking, cleaning? I mean, it's something that I hadn't even thought about. Why? I'm spoiled. 45 years marriage. My wife won't let me in the kitchen. She thinks I'm messy. I'm not. I can tell everybody I'm not. But her standard is that I am. So she likes and enjoys making food. Not all the time, but she does. But I'm just mentioning, Maura, when you got married, did that even enter your mind that I'm going to be making dinner for the rest of my life?
I have to tell you, when I got married, that was the last thing I wanted to do because I was a career woman. I would get home 7:30 at night. I would leave the house 7 in the morning. And there was a lady at my office who used to say to me, Maura, I'm making homemade food for you so that you don't have to stop at a fast food place on the way home. I was a working woman growing up right outside of New York City and seeing several things. I just decided I wasn't going to depend on any man. So I could remember coming into this marriage that I was not going to be a Susie homemaker. And of course, as life goes on, many years later, when we had our daughter, I left my corporate management career, stayed home, and became a homeschooling mother and helped my husband build a business and was always in the kitchen, never got out of it. So yes, I will tell you that my mindset, probably when I grew up, I was part of the old world, which was watching Donna Reed and, all of these kind of really idealistic environments on TV, but they had a woman in a very limited role. And then I could also see I wanted to make sure I could hold my own in society. So I was anti-drudgery. But I'll tell you what I found out. The very thing I was fearful of, staying at home, I thought, what do stay-at-home women do? Do they watch TV, eat bonbons, get overweight? No, it was the opposite. I found so many things in the community to do, so many ways to volunteer. We had exchange students living with us. We had kids over all the time. And there are so many things. I wasn't planning on going here, but this goes back into one of the things Lori mentioned. When you are a woman at home and you have a kitchen and you have an environment that you could bring people into, you can offer by way of service a cup of coffee, a dinner, a place to land, a place to come and maybe bring some of your cares. There is such a sense of stability and hope and hopefulness in places like that. So I was anti-drudgery, but I learned drudgery was actually, I was fine with it. It wasn't drudgery. Actually, I'm going to tell you this. It was very joyful for me. And in life, things change. There are new chapters, new things that go on. Barry, you had opened this up by asking if there was maybe forces out against marriage. And I wanted to add a little bit of something. I know that Diane said she doesn't think there's a conspiracy, that she thinks a lot of it is narcissism today. And I totally agree. But I will share some other things that maybe listeners today would want to hear. It used to be, and this could be, I would call it maybe forces at work in a variety of ways that change the way we view ourselves and what we look for in life. And I know that in the 1960s, we changed the tax laws. The divorce rate was very low, and then it started going up. And I learned about this from one of my husband's friends that he plays basketball with. He's probably in his mid 50s, grew up down south, wonderful man of faith, but his father left, and he was from a Black family. When he got his master's degree, he said, Maura, I want you to read my thesis, because it was all about what happens in families when they lose a parent and when the father is not present. But the same could be said even if a mom's not there. And he pointed to the fact that they changed various laws, that in certain communities, if you had a child, but the man was not home, you were entitled to more aid. And so forces like that over the course of decades end up producing generations of people that don't have families like they used to. So that was one thing. And the second thing too, I would actually say popular culture. All you have to do is look at what is being promoted. I've said this probably before. How many TV shows or popular shows do you find where you see an intact family? When we don't see it in front of us and it's constantly bombarding our attention through the airwaves or on our phone or TV sets, we tend to think that way. But to come full circle, I want to reiterate some of the things we said before. Barry, you opened up by saying, these are for all the good-looking people because they're looking for good. Our outlook on this program, the outlook of other people that understand how important marriage is, family is, to each individual element, but also to the children and to the outside culture, can also realize that we can be the changers, let's say, of people's perceptions. There's one other thing I wanted to offer. My husband and I spent 2 weeks recently up in Portland. Our daughter and son-in-law moved up there. They were out in your way.
Not Portland, Oregon, Portland, Maine.
Where they bought a house.
Portland,
they were very
Maine. Portland, Oregon is on the west coast, and Portland, Maine still has some semblance of stability.
It's like it does. It very much does. But I'll tell you, our son-in-law came from a broken home. And one of the first...
I need to interrupt you. Those of you who don't know what a broken home doesn't mean that the windows are smashed and the floors are broken. It means that there was divorce in the family. That's what we of different generations used to call divorced homes, broken homes. You can't use that anymore.
You got me on that.
Single parent units, right.
But our son-in-law came from that kind of a background. And I remember one of the first nights that we were there, he was talking about this. And we were talking about resilience in marriage and what to do. And I gave him one word. It was the word redemption. And it goes to faith, and it goes to what is our God? What do we trust in? When we get married, there's always going to be a problem. There's always going to be a rub. I had a mother-in-law that didn't like me because I wasn't part of the right ethnic group. I wasn't Polish. But we lasted, and we had a relationship over 40 years until she passed.
It took her 39 years to accept you, but yes.
I think she decided I was okay after all those years.
At least you were Catholic.
Yeah, at least I was, but I was not Polish. And she
didn't pick me up. If you were Protestant, I don't know.
Well, we went from Catholic to Christian, and then they thought we were on the fast track to hell. And I thought it was the same God. But anyway, here's the thing. I was sharing this, that everybody in a relationship, it's never going to be ideal. But if you have in mind redemption, is there something good that's going to come out of this, even through difficulties, challenges, and this goes to what Diane was speaking about. We've got a narcissistic society right now. We want everything easy. When you start living that path, you can't do anything. You can't succeed at anything because you quit everything. You give up everything. But if you have hope, if you have faith, and if you believe in redemption, meaning, how can I take this situation and look at it from an outlook standpoint, from inside? How can I take my challenges and grow from them? How can I be a bigger person? How can I see this situation differently? I'm going to say this now, Barry, and it sounds like I'm on my...
You're on the soapbox, yes. You're in the pulpit.
After 40 years of marriage. But you know what? I know that my husband and we have friends like this. We've been together with our spouses for years and decades, and we continue to grow. We go through challenges. Life happens. But you know what? There is a stability. There's a resilience. There's a love. There's this embracing of people beyond ourselves, and people are drawn to it, and there's a hopefulness to it. And when we do have that in our lives, and we have that strength, we not only add something to our hearts and our marriage and our family, but we give hope to other people who are maybe out there thinking, oh, I should give up. Oh, let me do it the easy way. And then they're left with nothing. But to work instead and believe in something greater and bigger. And just what you said, we started out, we end up growing. We become bigger people and broader people, more loving and embracing and full-bodied people than what we started as when we first said, I do.
And we do. And I urge you to welcome with open arms when your daughter and son-in-law come to visit you for 3 weeks in the middle of the winter, because Portland, Maine, they're coming down to Florida. Just be aware of that.
We know because they could both work remotely. And I think they'll be here probably February.
Yeah, well, they might even come earlier, when the snow gets up to about 12 inches in the first snow and stuff. But of course, what Maura was just talking about is that wonderful song, Faith, Hope, and Charity. That's the way to live successfully. How do I know? The Bible tells me so. Neither of you know that song, I guess, no?
You can see the look on her face. Never heard it.
I grew up with that song, nice Jewish boy going to listen to church music and such. Faith, hope, and charity. So sorry to say we'll come to the close of our hour, but I do want to express, like you mentioned, Maura, that I believe, Diane, you were spot on and saying that this is really an age of me, the narcissistic element of putting myself first, and therefore the commitment becomes secondary. And as you said just now, Maura, it's too easy to say, well, I want the easy way. And if it gets hard, hey, I'm out of here. Because that's what the narcissist insists upon. It needs to be something that makes me feel good. And growth, oftentimes, as we know, is a process that is very, how should we say it? It takes a lot of work. So on the simplest level, we all know that a chick pucking through an eggshell is really cute, except for one thing. That's a lot of work to peck through an eggshell. When the moth is in the cocoon and now it wants to come out as a butterfly, well, that didn't just happen. That hurt as you stretch. And we know, we have stories. I remember as a teenager, I think I was 12, 13, and I told my parents that I was aching all over getting up in the morning. And so they called our doctor, little Benny Friedman. That was his name, Dr. Friedman, who used to do house calls when I was a kid. That's a different story. And they called him up on a telephone. We actually had telephones. Called him on a telephone. They told him, Barry's hurting. He says, well, guess what? He's a teenager. His bones are moving. Because that's what growth is about, isn't it? It actually, you can feel it. It hurts. Now, the benefit, of course, is when you get through it, it's great. It's like Jimmy playing basketball. He played full court press and you're sweating after the game. And it was really tough and such, but was that worth it? Of course, because it's a great game. Otherwise, who needs it? You're just sitting there throwing hoops. So I think this is absolutely wonderful what we did today, because you put us on the right path, Diane. It's not a conspiracy in the true sense. It is more of a societal shift And remember, I told you about my new book, Oh Shift. You got to keep the F in place or the other stuff happens. So the shift in the mentality of our country, and many contributing factors. Part of it is that it's just, there's so much. It's too easy to be comfortable. And being comfortable is not the best way to live. One of the chapters in my first book of the joy of living is get uncomfortable. It's the best way to go. But you got to do that consciously. And as Lori pointed out, service is an important aspect of life. And being a two-parent household is the best privilege that any family can give to children of your own and others. It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with economic background. It has everything to do with stability, with commitment for the continuation of this great, remarkable institution. And I dare say, I'll quote a remarkably wonderful, insightful being. Marriage is the greatest institution on God's green earth. How you like that one, Diane? That was a little inside baseball stuff. Okay, well, our time has come to a close this session, and I am speaking for many thousands of people. I am honored and humbled that you make the time to do this. It is absolutely uplifting, and it's truly fabulous. Diane, I'm going to ask you, if you'd be so kind, 60 seconds if you something you'd like to leave us all with, and then I'll ask Maura.
Well,
60 seconds, kid.
The 60 seconds. Probably, I would say, as Jewish people, we're just entering the time of our rejoicing, which is the holiday of Sukkot, where we build little huts in our backyards and we stay outside.
In the rain, outside in the rain.
Right now, I'm hoping it'll stop by when it starts on Friday night. But one of the messages of Sukkot is that we're not alone, that we're not carrying the ball ourselves, that we do have support, and that there is a God who actually created everything, and we shouldn't try and take credit for it. We should realize our own humility and eschew arrogance, and realize that we have a part to play in the furtherance of the world, certainly the furtherance of our partner's life, our children's lives, our community, and that going out in the sukkah, as the rain starts to fall down on us, we realize that we can't control everything, that we are not in a position to know what another person is always thinking or what God has in mind when something happens to us. And that in a way, it relieves us of the burden of trying to control everything and make everything go the way we want. If we can, as you always say, Barry, just live life with joy and start off with Modeh Ani. Thank you, God, for giving me this new day so that I can start off and accomplish whatever it is that I can do to contribute and serve. Well, then it gives you a whole different attitude for facing your partner, for facing all the challenges that come to you. And you can sit out in the rain, and instead of cursing the raindrops, you can say, thank you, God. Look at the miracle of rain. It allows crops to grow and us to flourish. And if we can look at everything with a positive outlook and with gratitude, then I think that would make a big difference in saving our marriages as well.
So I would urge everybody, do a Google search. You can look up the word Sukkot, S as in Samuel, U, K-K-O-T. That's one way of spelling it. It's also called the Feast of Booths or the Feast of Tabernacles. So look it up. Maura, in 60 seconds, what would you like to share with everybody as we take our leave this particular new fall season?
Yeah, I enjoyed what Diane said, because as soon as you said that, you could see both our faces like, what are we saying, 60 seconds? But I think this is reinforcing a lot. I mentioned earlier our outlook, redemption, and hope. We live in the 3D world. Here we are encased in bodies. I would say over the course of even my personal life, everything that has made a difference is the hope in the unseen God, the benevolence of a good Father who made us all, and seeing redemption out of even challenges that go beyond what my natural mind can see, perceive, or understand. And I think when we live from that place of hope in an unseen God who's our creator, our who's the force beyond all of it, we bring something absolutely marvelous, magical, miraculous into the world. So how's that if we finish on that note on the time of tabernacles here? I think it's isn't that a picture too of God as one with us and looking to bring us into oneness with him. So
that is, on this high note, we're going to mention the word hope. I'm going to mention the word grow, and I'm going to mention the word one. So we, as Jews, we just completed a remarkable 25-hour period of time that is called in English the Day of Atonement. But don't read it atonement, read it at one mint. That was what we did for 25 hours, and there was no need to eat because we were just involved with thinking about and living the life of service. And the word hope, wonderful, Maura, stands for helping others progress every day, because that's what we do in our service. And the word grow stands for generating rays of wisdom, because that's what you have on Marriage with Joy. So from each one of us, we're going to do our group hug and then a blessing. So, of course, hug stands for heartfelt, unlimited giving. On the count of three. 1, 2, 3. And our blessing to everybody is go forth, live exuberantly, spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad. Go make a difference. Bye, everybody.
bye.
Welcome to Marriage with Joy, which is the most open discussion on the internet about the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant aspects of living in harmony with matrimony. Marriage with Joy unabashedly discusses the most interesting questions raised by listeners. Our informed and informative panel addresses issues with thought, wit, and aplomb. Voted best of the web 2 years running.